Good day, everyone. Our assigned topic is all about corporate governance. By the way, I'm Mendoza Daisy, the first reporter. Corporate governance is a concept that was introduced in the 1970s and the succeeding years to the present. It has become a topic debate around the world by both academics and practitioners. Corporate governance structures were put into place to protect the various stakeholders of corporation and prevent corporate scandals or failures from happening despite the existing rules and regulations. What is corporate governance? According to Carlos Jose Gatmaitan, faculty at Ateneo Graduate School, corporate governance merely viewed as systematic structure with internal policies that are implemented to serve stakeholders with honesty, reliability, and transparency. Which means corporate governance is a system of direction, feedback, and control using regulations, performance standards, and ethical guidelines to hold the board and senior management accountable for ensuring ethical behavior, reconciling long-term customer satisfaction with shareholder value to the benefit of all stakeholders in society. We now see the increasing importance of a company position in serving society as a prerequisite to achieving long-term success. Hence, its significant measure with the corporate governance umbrella. The tide has shifted even more heavily on the demand side, particularly towards the betterment of society as a whole, and is now the driver for board decision in their thrust towards survival and profitability. According to Tricker 2019, considered by many as the father of corporate governance, corporation is controlled or governed. When we say corporation, it consists of board of directors, executive, and management. They are responsible in governing the overall operation of the day-to-day activities in the company. Given this definition, it tells us that governance is a process that allows internal and external mechanisms to ensure that the resources of a company are optimized for the benefit of stakeholders. It intends to increase the accountability of a company and to avoid disaster before they occur. Next, good governance. Good governance is a strategic direction for all organizations because the long-term sustainability of organizational activity is dependent on the proper governance of the resources. It provides the necessary responsibilities and practices to ensure the benefits realization, optimize resources, and optimize risk while ensuring an organization is compliant with laws and regulation by providing value to stakeholders. Next, Philippine corporate governance. Corporate governance in the Philippines shares similar qualities with its East Asian counterparts, most observed of the family ownership according to Echanes 2006, Kabigting 2011, and Saldana 1999. This quality has referred to as among the weakest attribution of corporate governance in the country, if gauged against the codes of control and transparency is concerned. Ayo and Betty in 2001 cited two key features of corporate ownership. It is concentration and composition. Concentration refers to the action or power focusing on one attention. Corporation dilemma happen in two forms. It is low concentration and high concentration. Low concentration happens, the former occurs when the majority of the ownership is held by several majority and minority shareholders, while high concentration is the latter, when the majority of the ownership is held by a small number of major stockholders. Low concentration conflict arise between shareholders and managers, while high concentration conflict arise between the majority and the minority shareholders. According to Ayo and Baten, the problem with concentration is manifested in Asian development study in which it was reported that 46% of corporations in the Philippines were under family control. Next is composition, refers to the owners or shareholders. This can be in the form of individuals, family group, holding company, bank, institutional investor, or non-financial corporation. Composition dilemma is pronounced in the ownership of banks by corporate groups, and according to Saldana 1999, forming groups by which large shareholders control their investment through allocation in various business and banks are usually included in this arrangement. This condition contributes to weak corporate governance because it diminishes the capacity of banks to be effective external control agent, because these are the best positioned to gauge in the efficiency of corporate groups in investment financing. And the problem in the composition is factors contributing to bank failures. Weaknesses of corporate governance as a result of family ownership can be found in transparency. Ayo and Batin claim that the need for the transparency and disclosure is not crucial in relationship-based transaction environment where insiders exercise control over the degree of information disclosure, or they call it information asymmetry. The OECD Principle 2015 stated that disclosure influences the behavior of the companies and protect investors. Thus, information symmetry lends to withholding information on impropriety and management practices, making it difficult to monitor misdeeds, let alone the culprits accountable for misbehavior. According to OECD Principle 2015 and other codes stated in the Philippines regulatory structure, such as those Securities and Exchange Commission, Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, and Philippine Stock Exchange, transparency has been exercised. However, not to the level that could have prevented, for example, the closure of some Philippine banks despite the audit of BSP. Philippine Code of Corporate Governance. Philippines' own Code of Corporate Governance is stated in SEC Memorandum Circular No. 2 Series of 2002, completing the Corporation of the Philippines. According to Paras and Ramos, Ano Nuevo, 2002. The revised Code of Corporate Governance 2016 specified that the Board of Directors is mainly responsible for governance. However, it does not specify the recommended number of independent directors for publicly listed company. Code of Corporate Governance 2019 stated that the board should be comprised of at least 20% independent directors from the total number of directors, which means the board of committee are formed to aid in complying in good governance, and that management is accountable to the board, and the board is accountable to the stockholders. The family ownership structure is unique in East Asia, including Philippines. Governance and management. Governance and management are two different areas. Management focuses on the day-to-day operation of an organization. Executive and managers in management ensure that the company run well and ideally bring profits for its shareholders. On the other hand, governance function is carried out by a body or group of persons, which is board of directors or trustees, who governs the organization, making sure that the company or entity is efficiently and effectively run by management. Management is defined as how organization is operated by its human and material resources to achieve organizational success. Such success may be measured by profits generated through its operation and continued growth of its resources to produce more revenues. Management is widely viewed as hierarchical organization, which you can see in the picture. Meanwhile, the board of directors does not readily manifest itself in the organization structure because of its explicit definition. A board supervises the management and provides oversight, ensuring that the company is steered in the right direction for the satisfaction of its various stakeholders without direct interference in the day-to-day operation of the company. The board of directors may be viewed as an overlapping entity that provides oversight for the organization, and some executives, such as CEO, President, Vice President, which are members of the board.
Good day, I'm Ma.Lourdes Dumalag, second reporter of the group. Next is the key players in the corporate governance, which consists of 5 positions: the CEO, chairman of the board of directors, shareholders, and stakeholders. They are the ones who have the most power in corporate governance. First is the CEO, or the Chief Executive Officer. The CEO is the person responsible for leading and managing the entire organization and achieving its organizational goals. A CEO's role may vary from each company's culture and structure, but CEOs are responsible in managing the company's overall operation by collaborating with the board for the overall direction of the company. CEO holds the ultimate authority in making final decisions. The other titles for CEO are President, Chief Executive, or Managing Director. Next is the Chairman of the Board. The Chairman of the Board of Directors should not only provide leadership of the board but also play an important role in the governance practices of the company. One of the most important roles that they play is that they hold the most power and authority within the board of directors. The chairman of the board takes its role by getting a vote from the board of directors, and they can be also removed by voting if they fail to do their roles. Though the chairman of the board may not be always involved in the day-to-day operation like the CEO, the chairman of the board can also set goals and objectives inputting the rest of the board. Because the chairman of the board is one of the highest position, he can be responsible for appointing executives, determining their compensation, and approving certain management decisions. Third is the board of directors. This is the best entity for steering the company's strategic decision and evaluating its performance. Board of directors are a panel of people who are elected to represent the shareholders, which is necessary for all public company. That's why they are required to create a board of directors. The board of directors are responsible for protecting the shareholders' interests, establishing policies for management, oversight the organization, and involved in decision-making for organization. Next are the shareholders. Considered the owners of the company through their ownership or holdings of the stock shares. Shareholder can be a person, company, or organization that holds a stock in a company. To become a shareholder, you have to have at least one share in the company's stock or mutual fund. Being a shareholder have advantage because they are not much obliged to shoulder the debts or financial problem incurred in the company. Last are the stakeholders, any group of people who are affected by how a corporation operates in. They can be an individual, group, or party that has an interest in the organization. The common stakeholders are customers, employees, shareholders, suppliers, communities, and government. Every stakeholders have different interests. For example, customers as stakeholders because they are impacted by the service, product, or the operation and performance of the business. Other forms of organization. Not all organizations are for profit. There's a lot of non-profit organizations that can be formed to achieve goals and maximize organizational performance. When we say non-profit organization, it simply means that they do not earn profits for its owners. All money that earned or donated to a non-profit organization are being used to achieve the goals and objectives of the organization and to keep it running. The main objective of the good governance is the proper governance of its valuable resource for its stakeholders. One of the requirements to have good governance is being effective. Being effective means that the people must be smart on how to use its valuable resources and don't want anything to go to waste, so we all stakeholders can avail goods and services well. Theoretical perspective. When we say theoretical perspective, it is a set of assumptions about reality that inform the questions we ask and the kinds of answer we arrive at as a result. There are many lenses with which to study and look at corporate governance. We take a look at the most widely used and researched perspectives. There are 4 theories to be discussed. First is the agency theory. This perspective assumes that the 2 principal characters, the agent, managers, and principal, owner, are at the odds with their objectives. So here in agency theory, it involves 2 parties, which is the agent and the principal. The principal is the owner and the agent is the manager. So this theory works by principal hiring an agent in order to perform a service on their behalf. So principal entrusts his decision-making authority to the agent, where agent is using the resources of the principal. Though the agent here is the decision-maker, this theory assumes that the interests of principal and agent aren't always in the same page. But because principal trusts the agent, thus agent doesn't have the responsibility to the risk or losses that can come to the principal. That's when the principal-agent problem arises. So the role of agency theory in corporate governance is to understand the relationship between the principal and the agent. Because the agent represents the principal, he must present himself with the interest that the principal have to business transaction, not his self-interest, so that principal-agent problem don't occur. But if that happens, company can seek solution to that situation like incentive. This theory posits that agents cannot be trusted and act on their own interest and not for the best of the company. Second is the steward theory. According to this theory, the agent acts in the principal's best interest and therefore acts as a responsible steward of the company. When we say stewardship, according to Cron, it refers to the responsibility that companies have to understand and manage their impacts on the environment in any number of ways. In here, as I said in the agency theory, the principal trusts the agent to its decision, therefore the agent must act responsible for the welfare of the business. Stewardship theory argues that the people are naturally motivated to work and accomplish a work when they are trusted in doing it. People are becoming more responsible to the task and finish it well. Unlike in agency theory, in here, agents are more well-defined as a good character for which they feel accountable for what they've done, though they don't hold responsibility for the loss. According to Skurman and Donaldson, 1997, the agents are naturally inclined to provide proper oversight and works for the best interests of the owners. Because agency theory and stewardship theory have a contrast in principle, these have been widely debated because the tenets of agency theory should have provided a control mechanism to behave the agent, but did not do so, given the numbers of corporates are still collapsing to this day. Third is the resource dependency theory. Based on the organizational theories, this theory looks at the corporate governance from a strategic management view. It examines how external resources of organization affects how organizations behave for their maximum utility. Pfeffer and Salanik, 1978. The concept of this theory is like the saying, "No man is an island." Everything has something to rely on. The resource dependency theory examines the relationship between organization and the resources they use on the operation. Resources are raw materials, labor, executive management, strategic work, etc. Any organizations or company needs to engage to other organizations to have resources that are necessity for the business. If a company find a good supplier that can provide what they need, they can have a good relationship and it is an advantage. But on the other side, it can create uncertainty towards the organization who is in need. What I mean is too much dependency towards other organization can be a risk of external control. To avoid the risk, managers plan for alternatives. Last is the stakeholder theory. Given the growing social activism seen in the last century, Freeman, 1984, developed the societal perspective and viewed organizations as entities that are responsible for their action that affect anyone involved or affected by their existence. Edward Freeman said that stakeholder theory holds that a company's stakeholders include just about anyone affected by the company and its workings. He also suggests that a company's stakeholders are those groups without whose support the organization would cease to exist. Freeman talked about customers, employees, suppliers, political action group, environmental group, etc. are part of stakeholders that need to be considered and satisfied to keep the company healthy and successful in the long term. The benefits of this theory is that it can promote a positive feedback and creates harmony on the internal and external of the company. For example, on the internal stakeholders, if employees are treated fairly and valued as stakeholders, they are motivated to do better and result to a high quality work. Next is the culture and corporate governance. The relationship of culture and good governance is also supported by research. The influence of culture influences board practice and acceptance by Humphreys and Whelan, 2017, and contributes to the development of best practices. The board is responsible to practice good governance, which includes working to develop a healthy corporate culture. When the boards approach the culture proactively, it helps to protect a corporation's future. That's how the company protects its stakeholders. It's hard to define a corporate culture because of the broad variety of people who have different culture that can be part of company's culture. A company's culture helps to define who that company is. According to Litt, 2001, culture influences the organizational policies through the values held by decision maker. Culture holds the key to a good governance. Based on the policies and practices that the board implement will reflect to the values, morals, and behavior of the people inside the company. For instance, there are nuances in corporate governance practice between East and West. As I said, culture is big part of having a good governance. As we all know, East and West countries have different culture. In Asia, including Philippines, we have this emotional idiosyncrasy or odd habit, while the West, they are more open and straightforward. My last slide is approaches to corporate good governance. A rule-based approach to corporate governance relies on the regulation and the laws to ensure compliance. Just like in the PowerPoint, this approach to corporate governance is based on the view that companies must be required by law or other compulsory regulation. Legal requirements are required for companies to follow the rules, and there will be also legal consequences if the board failed to follow. Next is principle-based approach, wherein companies are required to explain why a certain violation of the code has been made. This approach does not require legal requirement, and this is the usual or common approach by which most organizations in the world are practicing. Board can judge to these practices while having flexibility in different circumstances.
Function of the board. In corporate good governance, based on Trigger 2019, there are four main functions of the board in CCG, or corporate good governance, which I will mention later. Here in the table, in external perspective, they need to provide accountability as what in the discussion mentioned, that they are the one who is accountable for the people around them. And of course, in external, they formulate the strategy here. While in internal perspective, inside of the company or organization or corporate, they need to monitor and supervise the management to set a policy since it's internal perspective. And time reference divided into two, past, current, and the future. One of the CCG main function is accountability. You're probably asking why be accountable? Simply because the success or failure of an organization rests on the board, and the board should be accountable not only to their shareholders but also to all the other stakeholders affected by their actions and behaviors. Second, monitoring and supervision. This is another function of the board, is to oversee the performance of its management, most especially internal perspective from financial statements, sales, net income, financial ratios, and budgetary control, and so on. Third, setting policy. For strategies to work or set a policies, procedure, and plans must be prepared for management to abide by. Lastly, the strategy formulation. Obviously, a company cannot survive without a strategy. This is the most important function of the board, as this will steer the company to achieve its vision and mission. Certainly, board members require strategic planning with varying backgrounds and expertise, which is the most common tool used in strategic is SWOT, the strength, weakness, opportunity, and threat framework. Membership of the board. Board size is determined by the current board and should comply with the terms established in the bylaws of the corporation. Corporation is composed of one director for OPCs, up to maximum of 15 directors, with each director owning at least one share of stock as per the guidelines indicated in Philippines Corporate Code 2019. The term for each director is set at 1 year among holders of stock of the company, 3 years in the case of trustees chosen from among members of the corporation. This is mostly the process of selecting or implementing directors in the corporate. Directors. Directors are normatively nominated by the shareholder controlled by the board in the director selection process as the best practices. But in other case, where a founder or majority of the group is in control of a corporation, the nomination usually comes from the entities through the nomination committee, much more so when the organization is in its start-up stage or sa stage na simula pa lang. Director classified into three types: the independent, non-executive, and executive directors. Independent directors are individuals who have no connection with the company. It is free from any relationship which may be considered a conflict of interest, while non-executive directors are individuals who are not part of the management but are related to a certain aspect of the company, such as being supplier, family representative, friend, and etc. On the other hand, executive directors hold a particular executive position inside the organization. This is the one that we are familiar of, also known as the CEO. Other senior executive position as the vice president. Directors must possess fundamental requirements of being directors, have the integrity, intellectual, and independence that follows good communication, skills, ability to read and understand financial statement, strategic planning, critical thinking, and networking. Politics in the board. An aspect of life is the existence of politics. Politics can be destructive if used the wrong way but can also be used positively to further a worthwhile agenda or cause that will benefit the company. Corporate politics may be described as processes and interaction involving power and authority that influence decision made for the benefit of an individual, group, or organization. In the study of corporate governance, it is important to understand a company's governance structure or where the power lies. According to Tricker 2019, noted that human behavior is based on relationship and by the processes of power that answer the question of how people behave in an organization is dictated by their association of power. Importance of committee. As a discussion, committee are formed because board work can be done effectively. By focusing and discussing particular issues separately from general board meetings, the time management of director is optimized. It is advisable and recommended that the chairman of these committees be independent director so that they truly perform their oversized roles according to the requirements of the regulating bodies. And these are the following committees required by regulating bodies. First is Audit Committee. This committee, the main objective of this audit committee is to oversee accounting and financial reporting, processes and result. They make sure that internal and external audit are carried out with integrity. Next is Remuneration Committee. It's responsible for identifying compensation and benefits plan for directors and senior executive through performance appraisals. Excessive compensation packages during economic downturns or financial crisis warrant a closer investigation of rationale behind said compensation. Lastly, the Nomination Committee. To assure effective working board, the directors on a board must be independent thinkers, including its executive directors. The nomination committee should nominate the right mix of board members to ensure objectivity, independence, and expertise. However, there is usually a preponderance of the old boys club in many companies. Having a majority independent directors board does not necessarily equate to better governance if the CEO and the chairman are in control of the board. While other committees can be formed by the board as part of the good governance, but this will depend on the needs and circumstances. That's mine. Thank you.
Good day, everyone. My name is Jairah de Jesus, and I am your last reporter for today. And now I'm going to tackle about the word an effective working board. An effective working board would require the sound leadership of a board. We have here the five working leader board about the leadership. First is commitment. Commitment in terms of time spent and in the achievement of a strategic objective. So if you have a commitment, it means you are dedicated and you know your obligation in your work. And if you spend time, it means you are willing to grow and to learn more. Second is expertise. Possess strong technical knowledge of the industry or business. So for the expertise, you have a skill and knowledge about your field, and that is your advantage among others. The third is unity, ability to work and get along with fellow board members, collaborating effectively in getting the group to agree on resolution. So the third is unity. If there's a unity, it means you have a harmony for the teamwork that can be result for the overall successful output. And also you have a good relationship and communication. The fourth is independence, challenging the status quo and critically questioning perspective. So when you have an independence, actually this is the most common skills and leaders should have, because if you are independent thinking, then you have ability to make sense of all things based on your own observation and experience. And also being independent, you are efficiency and have a control. The lastly is networking, providing resource connection for possible alliance in business development. And also we have here for the training, professional director associations such as the Institute of Corporate Director and Good Governance Advocates and Practitioner of the Philippines are the two leading outfits that provide such training. Because we know that training is very important to be more knowledgeable, and any professional endeavor, training and development are the key to building skills that will enhance performance. This also builds participant confidence in carrying on their own perspective roles in the organization. And also for the information symmetry is needed for board members to perform their function properly. Documents for review must be given on time with complete formations. When each director may have different needs depending on his knowledge of the company's operations, it is the director's right and duty to get information. Lastly is the good communication skills provide a smooth flow of information to the parties involved in corporate governance. Miscommunication usually leads to misunderstanding that may result of the performance of the company or the corporate. Next is good evaluation. One of the purposes of evaluating board is to continuously improve best practice and see it they are functioning effectively. The board is tasked to do evaluation internally and through a third party to ensure compliance within the legal and regulatory framework. We have here the best practice approaches to base evaluation that include setting time aside, at least annually, for the board explicitly to address its collective and individual member performance. So to the evaluation, it's very important to have at least one evaluation annually to every individual of member, just to see if they perform well, and also to see if they are very effectively in the company or in the corporate. Second is using an independent facilitator or consultant to help the board design a suitable evaluation process and to ensure that this is carried out independently and confidentially about the process of the evaluation, just to avoid disagreement and also argument. Third is conducting peer and self-appraisal of all board members and chairperson. It is also very important to have a communication and connection the board member and chairperson to have a engagement about the performance of each other. Next is family governance. So in family governance is a process to clarify the relationships, right, and also the responsibilities to ensure that the business is managed responsibly and professionally. Also, we have here the model for the family governance. First is the ownership. There is a two or more family member that are involved and have a majority control within the family. And also for the ownership, it needs the trust and also the shareholder meetings or the family office. And second is for the business. For the business, it includes a board of directors, the CEO and management team who work hard for the development or for the growth of the business. And lastly is the family. The family, it includes the family constitution, family council, and family meetings. And also, family governance are unique in the sense that there is an emotional component to it. According to Smith, Rovines, and Pizza 2014, argued that the objectives of good family business governance is the sustainable development of the economic value and emotional value well-being of the enterprise. And also, there are challenges to the governance of family-owned enterprise, even if it has been transformed into publicly listed company. Issues such as nepotism, the lack of professional managers, family infighting, third generation entitlement, and the absence of succession planning can lead to disruptions. So yes, so there is a good and bad advantage of the family business. So the good is, yes, you have a good connection and also you can manage your business within your family. Lastly is the ethical stewardship. One of the best board directors' responsibility is to ensure the proper governance of their organization's resources and address the needs of its various stakeholders. And also, the director is held accountable for actions taken by the company and monitoring management. And the director positioned in the board carries a lot of weight in the downstream activities of an organization's various functions. So what is needed beyond compliance on form and structure by which corporations are regulated and assessed is awareness and affirmation of ethical values in corporate values such as integrity, Stanislaw 2017 stated as the very core of governance character. And the ethical stewardship is good for business and involve the demonstrating respect for values that include honesty, fairness. So if only institutions are always run with the ethical behavior and stewardship, then the organization will have a good performance and engagement may result for the good image of the organization or corporate. It may sound simple, but it's not, because in the ethical stewardship you need the such training and development for the growth, yes, and development for the growth of the organization. Controlling shareholder also need to be reminded that corporations are not exclusively owned by them and that corporate belong to all shareholders regardless of the number percentage of their shareholding. And also corporations were considered as private. Not only they are accountable to their shareholder, but they are also, because we are also now living in the era where the corporations are accountable to the various public, rightfully demanding ethical behaviors So the corporation's various stakeholders must be protected, and firm profitability is certainly achievable without sacrificing good corporate governance. And for more information about the ethical stewardship, I provide a short video here on my end.
On the one hand, where the board of directors is responsible for governance and management theory, on the other hand, where management is. What stewardship theory argues is that the board and management are a single collective stewardship team at the top of a corporation, and the board's role is not to direct and control the corporation, but to support and assist the CEO and management in accomplishing their tasks. The weakness to stewardship theory, though, is because there is no bright line between the board and management responsibilities. When things go wrong, people just start finger pointing, and it's very difficult to hold the CEO accountable for results. There's a saying in governance that if you hold many people responsible, no single person is accountable.